I had very strange thoughts and emotions burble up this morning as I watched the ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. I mean, first of all, that always moves me to some sort of tears, either briefly or free-flowing. This morning, it was more like rage. That's what I felt as I watched that ceremony. The whole point of that ceremony is to somehow attempt to honor the dead, to honor the sacrifice that people made in fighting for this country. I know I can argue that until hell freezes over, but like I said, I want to step outside of that. They were fighting for this country, and they died. And they were mostly young people. Some of them still teenagers, some of them barely out of their teens. And as I watched that ceremony, I thought about this filthy fucker who is the president-elect of the United States, the one who says that the cemeteries are only full, these military cemeteries are full of people who were losers, who were what the hell were they doing going into combat? This son of a bitch, Donald Trump, with his goddamn bone spurs. And I think about what he has said, how he has denigrated military families, soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, all of them. And this filthy pig son of a bitch is now going to be the commander-in-chief? And I had the question while I'm watching the ceremony and thinking these thoughts that I'm sharing with you. Then I had the thought, is the military going to allow this disrespectful pig-fucking Donald Trump to become their new commander? Are they going to sit by the way our courts have, our press did, our judicial or legal system? Is the military now going to fall into line? And in the mind of Donald Trump, anyway, swear allegiance to him, even though that's not what they're doing. But Trump gives a fuck about the Constitution, or about the people who have died, or about the parents and the relatives and the sons and daughters who had to endure knowing that their family member was dead. Where? Do you know how many American military cemeteries there are around this planet? What did I hear this morning? 134 different countries have American military cemeteries. And then think about the number of dead, undetermined, who knows, lying in the bottom of oceans. Well, their corpses or their bones. People who were on military transports or battleships or aircraft carriers that were hit with bombs and kamikazes and submarines and so on and so forth. And they're gone. They're dead. Nobody will ever know where they are. There is no place to go to commemorate the death of that family member. Hence, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is supposed to represent, to some degree, all of those young Americans who were answering the call to defend their country or defend their way of life, or however you want to put it, and whose remains just might as well never have been born. There is nothing left. And then the next thought I had on top of, is the military going to just allow the transition of this democracy that is still forming, that has taken 250 years for us to get to this point, and now the military is going to stand by and say, well, okay, yeah, we're going to fall in line with the crazy fucking religious leaders and the press and the courts and the legal profession. We're just going to stand down and let this fascist, dirty, rotten son of a bitch take over. Really? Now, during the commemoration, I also came to a really horrifying thought to me. And for a moment, it was, I have to, I've always been honest in these podcasts and talk show programs that I have been involved in. And to answer you honestly, when the thought that I'm about to share with you, when I had this one, I got a little shaky. I remember recently I had my annual physical, and everything was fine. But one of the questions the doctor asked me was, do you ever feel, lightheaded or faint or that you lose your balance? This is one of the standard questions that people of a certain age are asked now when we go in for our physicals. And I told her no. I said, no, I don't feel that. I have a pretty good contact points with planet Earth when I'm walking or running or standing or whatever. But this morning, I had that feeling. Not that I was going to faint, but just a shaky feeling when I realized that all of America's military dead, every single one, from the Revolutionary War, every single American dead, black, white, Jew, Gentile, atheist, it makes no difference. Every single person who has died in America's wars or serving in the military did so to provide a path for Donald Trump. If you can get your mind around that and not feel that shakiness that I felt, well, you're a better person than I am. Every corpse, every decaying body, every cross, every Star of David in Arlington National Cemetery commemorates the dying of an American who did so to provide this path for a fascist, filthy, rotten, degenerate like Donald Trump to become the new president and commander-in-chief. Now, you might say, well, this happened also 8 years ago in 2016. But it was a little bit different then because we did not fully understand the depth of the depravity of this filthy son of a bitch. It took his 4 years in office and being surrounded by people who, half of whom were pricks like him, but the other half provided the so-called guardrails to keep this goddamn insane man in check. But every single high-ranking military officer who has ever had to deal with this fucking Donald Trump has come away with the same conclusion. He is a threat, an essential threat, an existential threat to the idea of democracy in this country. And they tried to get the message out. How many of these flag-rank generals made their statements during this election campaign? And the American people, at least the majority of us, said to the military leaders, fuck you. Yeah, you're just some kind of a goddamn, I don't know what you are, but fuck you. I'm voting for my boy Trump. And it's just impossible for me to get my mind around that, to think. And I had this thought while I'm watching this on television, this whole ceremony, commemoration. And I see all those high-ranking military personnel standing there. And they're not like the North Koreans or the Chinese or the Russian military, where they adorn themselves with fucking rows of medals and all this other shit, you know, with their big, ugly-looking hats. What the fuck is wrong with the militaries in these other countries? They wear those big, oversized hats. Jesus Christ. No, our people stood there in silence and respect, not for themselves and their chests full of fucking medals, but for the fact that laying there before them and honestly in cemeteries all around the country, or all around the world, were millions of Americans who have died for Donald Trump's ascension to the presidency. And the Biden administration has made it very clear that the transition of power will be peaceful, as our Constitution requires. And Joe Biden said that he had invited this murderous fucking scum filth, Donald Trump, for a meeting this week, next week, whenever his Lord, Christ, God, Jesus, and Master Donald Trump decides. Biden has invited him to the White House. And from this point forward, and maybe when he was a nominee, but from this point forward, this filthy Nazi fucker will have access to all of the military intelligence, all of the domestic intelligence, where it concerns domestic terrorism, all these people that are MAGA Trump-supporting bullshit artists who led the terror of January 6, 2021. Trump now will have all the information. He'll be able to sell anything to anybody, and no one can stop him. But the realization that just washed over me, I won't exaggerate and say I had a wave of nausea, because I didn't, but it just left me wobbly for a second. It really did. That Donald Trump is the recipient. He is the recipient of all the death and dying and pain and suffering of every single American service member and their families throughout the history of this country. Every single one of them died to clear a path for Donald Trump. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West, on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.